Hi everybody, I'm Nick, and today we're going to be building a microblogging API. So what does this series contain? First off, we're going to have a course overview and environment setup, that's this video here. Then we're going to go into a brief overview of C#, the language itself. If you've got some experience with C#, feel free to skip over that. All of the code is going to be included in the GitHub repository, so you can always take a look and see if there's anything of interest to you there. Then we're going to move on to an intro to ASP.NET Core and Web API basics, stuff like what is a web API, what is a RESTful API, so on and so forth. Then we're going to be modeling our data and introducing Entity Framework Core. We'll also be creating our database in this video. Then we'll be moving on to the services layer and dependency injection. We'll be testing our services layer using XUnit. That may be split into two videos, I'm not sure yet. Then we'll be implementing our first CRUD endpoints. CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. So it's how we're going to be creating, retrieving, updating, and deleting our posts, likes, so on and so forth. We'll be adding data validation and error handling, stuff like, is the user's handle unique? When a user is trying to create a post, does that post have content? If something goes wrong saving stuff to the database, are we handling that gracefully, or are we returning a stack trace to the user? We're going to be handling it gracefully. Authentication and authorization is going to be covered. Stuff like, is the user logged in when they're trying to create a post? Is the user allowed to delete a post they're trying to delete, or update a post they're trying to update? We're going to be adding pagination via query parameters. So as our microblogging API gains popularity, it's going to have thousands or millions of posts. And we're going to make sure that we don't return all of them when somebody asks for a list of posts, because that's going to be very resource intensive once we have a lot of posts. So we're going to be limiting them to a maximum of 100 posts coming back. And then finally, we're going to be deploying our app to Azure via GitHub Actions. So as far as technologies used, we're going to be using quite a few of them. C# is the language we'll be using to build our API. I've been using C# for a long time, 10, 15 years, somewhere in that area. It's one of my favorite languages to work with. I think it's a good choice for this course. We'll be using ASP.NET Core as the framework to build our API. It's written by Microsoft, it's pretty easy to use, but it's also highly configurable. We'll be using VS Code to write our code. I've chosen VS Code because it's cross-platform and it's free. In my day-to-day, I typically use JetBrains Writer, but it's not free, and I want to keep all of the tooling that we use in this course free. Entity Framework Core is the ORM, which stands for Object Relational Mapper. It's what we're going to use to interact with our database. It's going to allow us to query our database without writing any SQL at all. The only time we'll need to write SQL is if we want to manually check some data in our database. And we'll be using Postgres as our database where we will store our data. We'll be using Docker to host our Postgres database locally. Once we deploy to Azure, we will not be using Docker, but for local development, we will be. We'll be using Swagger for documenting and doing manual testing of our API, and then we'll be using XUnit as a testing framework where we will be doing our automated tests. So Swagger is for, manually testing it, like manually creating a post, manually registering a user, so on and so forth. XUnit is some automated testing that will tell us if our code should be working under the hood. And then we'll be using Git as our source control tool. All right. So without further ado, let's go to the download pages of all of these things we need. All right, so first we're going to need Git. You can download it for your platform here. If you're on Windows, you can click on Windows, and then you'll be downloading the standalone installer for your platform. All of the links to these download pages will be in the description of the video. Then we're going to want Docker. If you hover over Download Docker Desktop, and select your platform. Now, if you don't meet the system requirements, which I believe are Windows 10 Professional, 64-bit with virtualization enabled, there might be some other stuff in there. I can make a separate video on installing Postgres and configuring that for this course. If you are interested, let me know in the comments and I will get that put together. Then we're going to need the .NET SDK. As you can see here, we've got installers for macOS and Windows, and then Linux may have .NET inside of your package manager. We also have the binaries. If that's more your speed, you can just download them and install them manually. Then for VS Code, like I said, it's cross-platform, Windows, Linux, macOS. You can just download it and follow the installation prompts. And with that, we can move on to configuring our VS Code. So you see here, I've got nothing in this directory. So we're going to just create a directory called Microblogger. That's where our code is going to live. And then we're going to open up VS Code by saying code microblogger. All right, so here we have our VS Code. We have no extensions installed yet. We're going to do that now. First things first, we need the C# dev kit. So if you just type C# here, then the C# dev kit pops right on up. It's written by Microsoft. It has syntax highlighting, it's got error highlighting, it's got a solution explorer. It's just got a ton of really good stuff that we're going to be using throughout this course. Then these next two extensions are totally optional. I just like the way they make VS Code look a little bit. So the first one is Tokyo Night. I'm going to install that. And as you can see, it changed my theme to this nice darker theme. Then we want material icons, which I use just because I like the icons that it provides. All right, and that is our VS Code up and running and configured. So in the next video, we're going to be going over an introduction to C#, and yeah, I will catch you in the next one.